Us humans are made up of so many complex and often contradictory parts, and the idea of artificially recreating that kind of consciousness is a hefty task that books, movies, video games, and more have probed and pondered for decades. Yet, despite all the challenges, it's a plight developer Krafton is taking a stab at with its realistically rendered life simulator inZOI. Boasting an in-depth character creator, approachable building tools, and a slew of interesting social systems, it's already an impressive experiment. But as of its early access launch, it's one that struggles to feel coherent. In inZOI, you aren't a god, but rather an intern at a mysterious business known as AR Company. Here you have kiddie co-workers and a series of parallel universes to manage, controlling citizens called Zois as they navigate their daily lives. To do this, you'll model them from digital clay, imprinting them with personality traits and life goals before shipping them off to go to school, get jobs, fall in love, and create more generations of little Zois. It's hard not to draw immediate comparisons to The Sims, a series that inZOI is so clearly inspired by. Still, as I spent more time with Krafton's take on the genre, it's apparent the studio has its own ideas about what makes people tick. Alongside choosing your Zoi's name, gender, and age, you'll also pick their trait, which acts as the backbone for their personality. From scholar to socialite, there are 18 to choose from, and each archetype packs a series of positive and negative behavioral quirks into one simple package. For example, a charmer will have an easier time growing romantic relationships, but with the trade-off that their sad mood sticks around for longer. It's a convenient and speedy process, but one that isn't as customizable as I would have liked. Once in the world, you can select up to 10 preferences, such as a love of coffee or hatred of showering. But while all that can seem quite substantial on paper, unfortunately my Zois ended up feeling fairly similar in terms of how they actually behaved. Before you dive into running or ruining the lives of your digital avatars, you'll mush their physical features into a shape of your liking. The detailed editing option gives you loads of anchor points to pour at, a boon for those with specific ideas and time to burn. Perhaps my favourite aspect of this process is a symmetry toggle, which usually keeps your Zoe looking uniform and magazine ready, but leads to unique if not haunting creations when turned off. Nothing says business professional like a permanent people's eyebrow. On top of facial structure, there's also multiple layers of makeup to consider, as well as scars and freckles. That's before you even get to the slew of sliders that tweak skin texture and genetic features like how prominent your chin cleft is or how deep your smile lines can go. There's plenty of hairstyles too, with multiple color sliders that allow you to choose the highlights and lowlights, as well as alter the length in real time. It's a mouthful of polished features that I could easily spend hours with. And I did. But it's not over just yet, as you'll also have 9 different looks to style for each Zoe, plus accessories to tag on top of those. Current trends like low-rise cargo pants and nupsy-like puffer jackets have their place alongside classic picks like tailored army jackets and simple pencil skirts. The pool of options is reasonable on its own, and the craft menu lets you tweak more specific aspects like the sleeves or neckline of a top. Admittedly, crafting is a fairly basic system, but it does well to fill in the gaps in the current wardrobe. So you made a family. What now? More choices, of course. There are 2 locations available to live in at the moment. Bliss Bay, which is a beachy area that boasts burgers, buses, and a replica Santa Monica Pier, and the Seoul-inspired metropolis Dowon, which consists of towering skyscrapers and grassy public parks. Unfortunately, this is where inZOI's slick first impression starts to wane. It's clear Krafton wants these cities to seem bustling, but the more time I spent wandering around, the more the environment started to blend into one fairly empty, repetitive scene. I eventually noticed Zois acting like sentinels, running between locations in packs. I can't deny that watching a gaggle of them all sprint to a public park isn't funny, but it also left me longing for a world that felt more human. The strange choreography and inaccessible architecture gives the world an uncanny atmosphere that makes you feel more like an onlooker than an active participant. You can alleviate some of the alienation by curating a corner of the world to call your own. The build mode follows a similar set of principles to the Character Creator Studio. More is more. There are multiple wall sizes, windows, and doors which you can adorn with custom textures and colors. Furniture can also be customized, and you can tweak pretty much anything from the metallic accents of your fridge to the fabric of your sofa. As with the clothing crafting, there's also furniture crafting to mess around with, and you can create basic objects like desks by combining a distinct tabletop with a unique set of legs. This system is fairly rudimentary, but I thoroughly enjoyed blending oppositional aesthetics like a cottagecore mushroom lampshade with a copper piping base to create what I'm calling a fungus punk light. Yet, despite all the tools at my disposal, the frequently clunky UI meant I struggled placing objects or extending rooms, often scrapping a complex building concept for a more angular one, as I opted for function over style. Family, check. Home, double check. Now it's time to keep your humble abode running and your wacky avatars alive. Thankfully, Zois are fairly simple creatures, and you only need to juggle a few systems to stave off an early grave or messy house. Alongside managing needs like hygiene, hunger, and sleep, they have short-term urges to fulfill and larger ambitions to track, both of which reward you with positive mood modifiers. A helpful pop-up window called a Zoi card is where you can check your avatar's individual skills, which are nurtured through activities like cleaning or playing music. Zois also have values which form based on the trait you selected to begin with and the types of experiences that have molded their perspective in the time since. Keeping an eye on all these levers creates an ample workload. It's just a shame I never felt like I was working towards anything meaningful, with many of these metrics amounting to very little in terms of gameplay payoff. This lack of depth extends to job and school progression, which is tied to whether your Zoi completes a small list of tasks during the shift or after class. For the most part, my Zois managed this on their own, leaving me to potter about until they were done, my influence having little to no bearing on their acumen. Big milestones like marriage and kids also lack adequate significance, and despite working to help them achieve key goals, they felt unbothered about the fruits of their labor. Ultimately, my Zois didn't seem to have much of a soul, despite having the building blocks in place to imagine one. Occasionally, their moods would shift, and they could emote in a realistic and charming way, but this rarely stopped them from acting the exact same way they would, regardless of being happy or sad. It's intriguing to see what Krafton is driving at with all these moving parts. As of right now, though, there's a lack of cohesion that makes the overall sense of progression feel somewhat meaningless. There is a bit of a saving grace though, and that's the karma system, which acts as the nefarious antagonist that oversees your Zoi's happy little lives. A kind and gregarious Zoi is more likely to win the lottery or earn a prize from a claw machine than one that's been farting secretly, in a malicious way. Hilariously, despite this inbuilt limitation, the Zois all seem to want to be bad people when left to their own devices. Or at least that was the case across my many households. Managing a house of 5 was like running a daycare, but instead of having a tantrum over sharing toys, my children would steal from my purse and start screaming at strangers in the street. inZOI gets close to replicating some of the silly magic The Sims is known for in these moments, providing me plenty of clippable encounters, which does at least infuse the world with some much-needed personality. Addressing the elephant in the room, it's no secret that Krafton has partnered with NVIDIA to add AI to all of its games, and inZOI has not been spared from that decision. Across the build mode and the creator studio, there are options to create custom textures using generative AI by writing a prompt into the submenu. Beyond those generative textures, the in-game signage, writing, and dialogue trees all have a stiff, artificial whiff about them. I couldn't be sure as to whether they were produced by generative AI too, but the fact that it felt that way isn't a compliment, and says something about the quality of conversation prompts as a whole. Many friendly chats veer off the rails into awkward conversations about crypto or the development of artificial intelligence. While it's easy to ignore them while crafting, it's impossible not to notice that strangeness when trying to make friends or form a romantic connection. inZOI is by no means perfect, but it is impressive. Its early access launch is a mish-mash of unfinished ideas and engaging mechanics, and I'm still finding little surprises 30 hours in. The character creator and build mode are already complex and relatively user-friendly, and the karma system is a clever way to introduce drama into the world. But inconsistent behaviours across its uncanny locations and conversation topics don't put those good ideas in the best light. What's available right now is an enticing slice of something that could eventually be great. It's worthwhile enough already if your main interest is curating realistic dioramas to pose your custom Zois in like dolls. However, if you're looking for the moment-to-moment depth of something like The Sims, you'll need to let Krafton keep cooking for some time yet. For more, check out our reviews of AI Limit or Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. And for everything else, stick with IGN.